pleasure in welcoming. We had quite the rocky start. Art is but a reflection of the human world. Art is a production of the human mind, conjured by our creative spirits, put together through our innovative expressions, a product of our worlds, our thoughts, our beliefs, our perceptions of the world we live in. Yes, an artist is a minuscule part of the world, but also a mirror that reflects and sows the seeds of introspection. A very good evening to one and all. It gives me immense pleasure to meet you all on this rather inquisitive evening. My name is Akshat Ram, an undergraduate student with the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, and I am your host for this evening. I take pleasure in welcoming you all to yet another In Conversation series of talks hosted by Vannam IIT Madras in association with the Classical Arts Club of IIT Madras. We have with us an exciting panel this evening to discuss diversity in the Indian classical arts. The Indian classical arts is an integral part of the socio-cultural history of this country. If you look back at the history, the classical arts ethos, especially the performing arts, has always seen massive changes in its system, beliefs, etc., especially when the world around it was also changing. As I said before, the arts is but a reflection of the society we live. With the turn of the 21st century, the need for more open and meaningful discussions on gender, equality, sexuality, discrimination has grown phenomenally. The classical arts environment, which has been holding on to its patriarchal and discriminatory ideals under the veil of safeguarding its purity, is now forced to open up and introspect. Today, the performing arts, especially the classical arts, is going through a major change of gears and is at a juncture where it needs to rethink what they consider the founding stones of this great art form. Now, having set context for this evening, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome the panelists for this evening and introduce to them to the audience joining us. Miss Sumana Chandrashekhar is a Ghatam player training under Guru Sukanya Ramgopal. She is also trained in Carnatic vocal under Guru Rupa Sridhar. Sumana has performed on the Ghatam in prestigious venues and festivals across the country. In Delhi, Hyderabad, Surat, Shillong, Lucknow, Dharwad, Zero, Mumbai, Chennai, and other places. She has also performed at the International Frame Drum Festival in Freiburg, Germany. As an independent researcher, she is interested in the history of the Ghatam and Carnatic music and has worked closely with Ghatam makers in Tamil Nadu. Her experimental performance work based on the story of the Ghatam, titled Rendu Ghatam, has been well received. Sumana has also worked in music education initiatives in Karnataka. She presently works as the program lead at the India Foundation for the Arts, IFA, a national independent arts philanthropic organization based in Bangalore. She's traveled extensively within the country and has worked closely with individual artists, arts communities, and researchers. A very warm welcome to you, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining with us today.
Thank you, Akshat. Thank you, everybody at Vannam, for having us for this very important discussion.
Our next panelist for this evening is Mr. Karthik. Karthik is an accomplished musician, writer, media personality, and theatre personality from Karnataka. He is well known in the performance arena for his creative endeavors and collaborations. Karthik has collaborated with theatre groups, dancers, and has been instrumental in creating a lot of original work. Having learned Bharatanatyam for over 2 decades has helped him carve a niche for himself as a composer and vocalist for dance productions. Karthik has performed as the most prestigious sabhas in India. He continues to travel the length and breadth of the country for his performances. He has written and published widely on Carnatic music, including columns on classical music in the Hindu newspaper and other prestigious websites and music magazines. He is regularly summoned to present lectures on music in all prestigious sabhas and music universities thanks to his exemplary oration skills. He has written many musical operas in Carnatic classical music and has conceptualized many dance drama productions which have been performed at many places. He has also served as an associate and assistant director to many television productions and served as a story, screenplay, and dialogue writer for many hugely popular TV series in Karnataka. He has also marked his presence as a lead actor in a Kannada TV serial which won much acclaim. Karthik is a voice to reckon with in theatre now as a playwright and director with productions Patanga Prabhava and Amma Matu Suhel, which mediate and talk about gender and LGBTQIA plus community issues. Thank you so much, Karthik, for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
So before we begin with the main part of the discussion for this evening, I thought it would be nice to take a moment and reflect upon your individual artistic journeys. I would like to understand your journey with the art alone as a separate entity. So to Karthik, to begin with you, if you could tell us in brief when you began learning and how and what inspired or keeps you inspired in classical music.
Uh, yeah, I'll try to keep it very brief because it's very difficult to talk about my journey with art because it's a continuing process and it's reborn and rediscovered every day. So it's very difficult to talk about it. But in retrospect, so I fell in love with any form of art, I think because of, like many people in India, because of their mothers. So my mother was a very important role. She taught me to love art. She taught me to be passionate about art, and she taught me to be passionate about storytelling. So I think my relationship with everything, music, dance, theater, or whatever, it comes down to storytelling. I like telling stories. I'm a very expressive person, and for me, it's all about that. And I was trying to find different mediums through which I could tell stories. So it was dance, and then music. So it was all beautiful. So that's how I went into learning things. I focused mainly a major chunk of my growing up years to learn classical music and to study that Carnatic classical music, and then to reach a point where I felt like I had to completely divorce myself from it and to be totally shaken about with so many things in it that I could not feel like I was a part of it, and then to relearn to love it in my own ways and to have my own equation with it, to rediscover it with my different lens and to make it mine and to claim my space in it in whichever way it is possible, and not to let the majoritarian voice have its stake, so we cannot let that happen. So that is how I am. So that is my journey with music. Basically, it's a very short, concise thing. If you want anything more, you can please ask me down the line.
Yeah, so I am definitely going to come back to that whole discussion about carving our own spaces. But Sumana ma'am, I would like to take you here and ask your journey. I'm particularly interested in not only because of your dual journey as both a percussionist and a vocalist, but also a female percussionist in what is known as the male-dominated field. You seem to have made what people refer to as the not so natural choice at a very beginning, and as how did this journey happen and how did it grow?
All right. So I'll take a little longer than Karthik because this is a story that I love to share. I've been a student of Carnatic music, learning vocal music since I was 7. So I trained for several years. For over 20 years, I trained as a vocalist with very revered gurus all of whom I love so much. And then sometime in 2009, I don't know what happened. You call it providential. It could be whatever. So I woke up one morning feeling that I would die if I didn't play the ghatam. Till that point, I had no special affinity for this instrument. There was nothing special about percussion that I was enamored by or anything, and not at least consciously. But and this experience started coming to me over and over and over again, and I felt, what's happening to me? I don't know if I'm hallucinating or what is this. And then I discussed this with my friends. I discussed this with my vocal guru, Rupa Sridhar ma'am. And all of them said, look, this must be your calling. You cannot just ignore it. Just go where your heart takes you. And I hesitated a lot because I knew that it would mean that I have to invest time and energy and all of that into it, into learning something new all over again. But it really was something that I could not hold myself back on. So then I decided, I said, okay, I'm going to learn the ghatam. And my next step was to find a guru. And because of the kind of position that I was coming in, the kind of intense inner passion that I was coming with, I needed a guru who would understand where I was coming from. I really didn't want to go to a guru who would say, okay, you learn Ridangam and come back, or you do 5 years of something basics and come back to me, and then let's see. I couldn't afford that time. So what I would do is I would just go quietly sit behind, in the last seat in concerts and observe a lot of Ghatam players, because I had to find a guru who would understand me and who I could just surrender to, because I just needed the Ghatam to come into my life. So, and this particular concert, and so fresh in my mind, I saw Sukanya Ramgopal ma'am play the concert, and I just said, here's my guru. It can't be anybody else, because I just loved the way that she was cradling the Ghatam that day. And it was like a baby in her hands. And I said, if I have to learn, it must be her. But once I had made that choice, again, it became so difficult for me, because I didn't know if somebody of that stature, somebody of that, a very senior artist like her would actually take me as a student at a very basic level. I was just going to ask her to teach me the ABC of Ghatam. So I procrastinated for a very long time. And then again, I was coaxed by friends, and my other people said, just go ahead. We'll see what happens. Just jump into it. I called her one day and I said, ma'am, this is what is happening, and I just need to learn the instrument. Can you teach me? She said, yeah, sure, come. So I went to class. I started my class. I was so thrilled. And the second day of my class, I saw that there were tears in her eyes. And I didn't understand what was happening. I asked her, ma'am, what happened? She said, for 35 years, I've been waiting for a female student. And here you are. So that's how the journey started for me. It seemed like we found each other. And it's been 12 years now. And it's been an incredible journey.
I think just listening to you talk about your guru with such reverence and such such love for her, and more so for the art, just reassures the fact that the art is an indispensable part of our lives, and is more than just a factor of entertainment, if I could put it. So Sumana, I'm just going to stress upon another part of that question. The question of gender politics in any field of arts is indispensable today. Classical arts has always been the brewing ground for ideals of patriarchy, sexism for years together. What has your reaction to this sexism been, and how have you seen the change in the last couple of decades, personally and professionally, especially because you come from the percussion side of the classical arts?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. First, I'd like to prefix what I'm going to say with what we mean by classical. I'm sure all of us here are in agreement about it, but just to share this with the audience as well, I'm sure we all understand that the classical itself is a constructed category, and this whole discussion that we are going to have today is based on this fundamental idea that the classical is a political category, it's a constructed category, and that's how, so the classical will always be in quotes throughout this conversation. Having said that, you used a very interesting word, brewing. Now, brewing is to prepare, brewing is to infuse, brewing is to allow something to ferment. And the classical arts over the years have unfortunately become fertile grounds that have enabled the brewing of patriarchy and sexism. And needless to say, today they are so enmeshed in both the music, learning, teaching spaces and in the performance spaces. Now, this is not something that has happened in the last decade, and the last 2-3 decades. There is a historical moment to it. We just to briefly touch upon that, we know that in the early part of the 20th century, precisely around the late 1920s, when the nationalist movement and the anti-Nazi movement came together in order to begin the process of classicizing, it was also the censoring of the woman's body. It was the working on what is the gender stereotype, what should be and what should not be in the classical. So these were the ideas that were being worked on at that moment. And over the last 100 years, these ideas have congealed. They have become solidified over the years. So we are talking about things that have come to us in the last 100 years. So these are really very, very powerful and strong ideas. And earlier that you were talking about how it has shaken the foundations of how the Me Too movement, for instance, has shaken the foundations of classical art. These are what the foundations of classical arts have, in some ways, they have become. So the whole the superstructure of the classical arts has come to stand on patriarchy and sexism. And this is not just Carnatic music. This is, I can risk saying that this is almost across all the classical arts. So how does patriarchy actually work? And as I see it, there are two ways in which this process happens. First is there is negligence, marginalization, and a near erasure of women's histories. Right? And the second one is by clearly demarcating spaces based on gender, by distinctly marking out spaces where women can and where women cannot enter, where they can perform and where they cannot enter, how they dress and how they should not be presenting themselves in a concert, what they perform, what they don't perform. So all these things are sort of, they are kind of unwritten, but it's public knowledge, so everybody knows and you follow the system. And of course these decisions are taken by patriarchy, right? It is patriarchy that decides who does this, who does not, especially decisions about women. So in the last 100 years, these have been created, these have steadily congealed, and these are among the several stereotypes that the classical arts have actually been playing with. And I would actually say that even more than the other concerns, there are other concerns with regard to caste or religion and so on, but I would go on to say that it is actually the stereotyping of gender which is the larger agenda. And because it is all to do with the body, and once you have the body in place, once the body has been constricted and put in a certain shape, then caste and religion and everything falls in place, because the body is the carrier of all these other ideas. And therefore the classical arts have become this epicenter that has, right, like you said, that have been brewing these ideas for a long time. And your second part of the question was how have I seen the scene change in the last couple of decades. This is an observation, and I find it fascinating. I think in the earlier years, these would be said very explicitly. Now, my guru has had these experiences where they would say, sorry, the mridangist does not want to perform with you today. And she's been stopped at the gates of a concert hall and asked to go back because the mridangist that day does not want to play with a woman. And this is not something that happened 15, 20 years back. A very senior Mridangam artist also said this to her just 2 years back, as recently as 2 years back, right? So there are ways in which this happens very explicitly. But I think that's also, there is a slight move in the recent years where things are done more, it's an undercurrent. So for instance, I've had instances where they will switch off my mic, or they will say, I had an experience where the mridangist that I was playing with would just signal to me in the middle of a concert, or he would say where I should play and where I should not play. So these things become very subtle, and I find this whole shift in how you're interacting and engaging with women on stage is very fascinating. Yeah.
The whole story just kind of puts a perspective on, how much ever we try and how much ever we take that step forward towards, removing the whole concept of sexism. Or, I mean, it's not possible. It's not a one-day thing at a time. But even to just kind of move the sexism away from the narrative, the more cases, like the more narrative that we are feeding in some way. So Karthik, I'm going to come to you for the next question, because I was when I was going through your bio as well. You have had a very as somebody from my team was saying, a very versatile career as such. You've been a dramatist, you've been a poet, you are a classical musician and all of that. So I want to understand that. I have two parts to this question. The first question is, the classical music system, be it Hindustani or Carnatic as we know it, is more rigid and rooted in yesteryear ideals, right? So, growing up as a queer musician or an artist should have been quite the battle. So, I would like you to shed some light on it, and especially possibly like focus on how your other art forms, be it theater, be it being a poet, being a writer, has kind of helped you carve this kind of a personality in the so rigid structure of the classical music system.
Okay. I would like to take off from where Sumana left. I can, without any doubt, say that patriarchy rules the classical art scenes. And how I say it is not by observation, it's by practice, because I was part of that. I was part of the system. I was entrenched in patriarchal ideas. I used to celebrate everything male in music, looked down upon female artists, because it was taught to me, and it came naturally to me. And I'll tell you, none of the gurus or teachers, they're not bad people, or they're not bad human beings. They do not know that they're practicing patriarchy, because that is so in our DNAs that it's very difficult to stand back and observe that this is what is happening. Okay, so now in retrospect, I can go and listen to Bala Saraswati Amma or Brindama sing, right? And I can say that there is Paripurna Kama is the style, but I was asked to sing. Why? Why was I asked to sing like that? And why was this style celebrated? So who bought this? So if you just observe the journey of how music was during the Nadaswaram and the hereditary musicians era, and then how it came once the Brahminization of the arts took place. It's very interesting to observe that, along with it, how patriarchy took control of everything. The idea of aesthetics, the idea of how everyone should dress, how we should present, how palace in Kerala will ask you to sing shirtless. Why? So it is very interesting to observe all this. And like when I was learning as a queer student, so this is what happened. So this came to me as a blessing. My identity of me accepting myself as queer, so that suddenly put me in a minority bracket. And now when I understood how I was looked at, how I'll be laughed at, how I'll be mocked at, how I'll be stereotyped at, that is when I could understand the story of gender within music and how it happens. And this is the lens through which I understand caste. It is everything that I understand from here. If not, I would be happily celebrating this, and I would be there, because I wouldn't know, because privilege gives you that blindness of not understanding or knowing, because you have it your way. So why you should worry what is wrong with others? So that is the basic problem. Now, me being versatile and into other system of arts, yeah, it was cultivated from childhood, but it is something that I have to hold on to, because I felt very caged in classical music. Okay, one is I suddenly started to find it very distasteful when musicians celebrate being divine or call themselves divine. And on a very odd day, I would think, if I'm singing here today, It is because I'm healthy, and I'm healthy today because my surroundings are healthy. If the municipality workers didn't come today and clean the garbage or the surroundings, then there would be a pandemic like we've seen, or some other disease, and we would all die. So isn't their work equally divine? Are not they doing divine works? Or just because I'm singing Ramakrishna directly, do I become more divine? Or just because I'm an artist, I am more divine? See, this kind of narcissism is something that started hitting me from a very early on age, and I started to distance myself from that idea of feeling divine, or I don't like that. So I wanted to find mediums where I could be human, not divine. I don't want to be above the pedestal. I don't want to be near God. I want to be near people. I want to be near suffering. I want to celebrate human stories, and I want to see my fellow people. I want to touch another human. I want to hug another human through my art, and talk and communicate and understand and love. For me, so that was very important. And for that, I needed different ways. I needed theater. I needed poetry. I needed to, went out through writing. So this is how I went into all the other arenas, and I went into all the other arts. And somehow, even though classical music is beautiful, and the classical music and classical dance has so rich, so beautiful, somewhere we have to rebuild everything very, very strongly. Like even 15-20 days ago, a month ago, I did a reel on Instagram, reading out in speed all the music theoreticians, academicians, writers, starting from Bharata till the race at Sambamurti. All are male. There is not one female Grantakarta's name. Why? Who erased all her stories and kept only his stories alive? Who erased all this? It's very interesting. When you read Kshetraya Padas, some Padams are not his. They were written by courtesans. He couldn't have written them. But how did the credit go to all the male composers? Where are all the female composers? Did so many hereditary dancers who could sing beautifully, were scholars in language, couldn't they compose? So where did those compositions go? So we need to work and recreate and build this whole narrative around which we teach history of music, around which we discuss music, classical arts and all that. And like I said, the other arts definitely help. They help me stay anchored, and they help me observe and bring me down from this pedestal of people calling me divine and stuff like that. And so that's why I need to be everywhere, and I need to distance myself occasionally to show that I'm human. And so if that answers your question, I'm not sure.
That perfectly does. So something that you mentioned just struck me, and I thought I'll just share a thought. So Muthu Kanalammal is the last surviving Dasi of the Dasi tradition of dance that still exists, and she's the last surviving person in that. And in a documentary that the government of Tamil Nadu did, she very interestingly points out that she says it in Tamil. I'll obviously translate it. She says that my art and what I've learned is supposed to be something that I am able to take forward. I should be at a position where I can teach somebody. Her father was what we call a Nattuvanar in Tamil, which I'm the person who plays Nattuvanam. I'm not very sure how to explain in English. So was a Nattuvanar, but she says he does not belong to my art. My art is still mine. It does not belong to him just because he taught it to me. So that kind of puts into perspective how individualistic the art should be perceived as, and how women of the past have always have to face this whole erasure, as you said, of their stories.
Just to button quickly. So like when you talked about that, see, I have refused and I've stopped talking about hereditary dancer communities and all that, because I think we need voices from that community to speak, and we should not appropriate their voices. So I don't do that. I would rather Nritya Pillai or somebody else speak about it and listen to them and learn from what they speak. But what is I observed and I've discussed and I've learned through their writings also is that even there, there's some very beautiful study of patriarchy. When the Devadasi abolition, the act came in, and the temple dancers were stopped, are not supposed to perform. They could be arrested, so they had to go into hiding, not allowed to perform. The men still went on to teach Brahmin girls, and they became gurus, and they still became celebrated Netvanars, and they survived. It is the female who was punished. It is her body, her identity that was punished. So that is an observation that it shakes me every time I think about it.
That's very true. So, Sumana ma'am, I'm going to come to you here because, Karthik and me were discussing about, the erasure or the concept of women not having the voice, especially within the classical music framework. You, as I mentioned before, are part of a very handful of female percussionists in Carnatic music. You said in 25 years, Sukanya ma'am's first student was you.
35
And
years.
35 years, the first female percussionist, and she is known to be the one of the most celebrated percussionists. And very handful of female percussionists, be it in the Carnatic music world or even in the larger picture of our country itself, right? So, how has this journey redefined your perception of the arts world? And what do you think is the need for the art for us to kind of, for the lack of better terms, lure in more female students, especially into the world of percussion?
Yeah. So when I started learning the Ghatam, in fact, this very line, it stuck in my head. I started thinking, why did ma'am have to wait for 35 years to find a female student? Like, what is the subtext of this line? It started bothering me. And as I started progressing with my Ghatam, I was torn by a deep search for identity. Who am I as a woman Ghatam player? Who am I in this whole history of the Ghatam or the history of Carnatic percussion? And when I started looking back, of course, through the journey, through the lens of my guru, I could find hardly any other women's stories, let alone the Ghatam. Of course, it's only ma'am with the Ghatam, but even otherwise, there were very few stories I could find, very few people that would inspire me, women who I could look up to for inspiration. And so one part of my journey was, of course, studying my guru and her journey, because that became sort of a textbook for me to understand the gender politics, to understand what it means for a woman's body to be on stage and so on. But on the other hand, I also started to delve into the making of the Ghatam. And I went to Mana Madurai, where the Ghatams that my guru and I play on. So it's a tradition of playing the Mana Madurai Ghatam. So I went to Mana Madurai, I stayed with the family, and I had this deep desire to just know the material. What is this thing that I'm playing on? What is this earth? And I stayed with them. I trained in Ghatam making, and everybody at that point knew that it was Ramesh who was making the Ghatams, and before him it was his father Keshavan who was making the Ghatams. But there, when I stayed with the family, I noticed that there was this lovely old woman, Ramesh's mother, who would sit inside and make Ghatams. And she was not somebody who was easily approachable, not somebody, I could, and at that point, I did not know to speak Tamil as well. So it was very difficult to get through to her. And she was like this no-nonsense workaholic. She's like, I don't care who you are. Just let me do my work. But in the days that I stayed there, somehow I found access. Somehow I started spending time with her. And we became very good friends at the end of my stay with them. Sometime in the middle of that stay, she said, the whole world thinks that my son makes the Ghatams. And earlier they thought my husband was making the Ghatams, but it's actually me who does it. And I found this beautiful. I said, wow, here's another guru I found. Here's another inspiration that I've been looking for. And Meenakshi Amma has been another guru for me, truly. I've learned so much from her. She's really opened my eyes to a completely different worldview of the Ghatam, which is not the classical worldview. She's like this Kabir kind of character who opened up the idea of the Ghat for me. So after I came back from that journey, I wrote about Meenakshi Amma, and I really wanted the world to know about this person who's actually making all the Ghatams that are going all over the world. And I was very fortunate to have Sajita Madatil, a very dear friend who was at that time deputy director of the Sangeet Natak Academy. And she took this up and she said, hey, here's a person that we have to give an award to. And then the very next year, Meenakshi Amma was given the Sangeet Natak Academy Award. After that, everybody knows about Meenakshi Amma now. The whole music fraternity talks about her. People have been doing articles about her. And I feel very gratified. I feel very glad that these are the kinds of women's histories that need to be written. We need to push boundaries. We need to talk about them, go in search of them, look for it, and put it out there for people to acknowledge, for people to see. I'd also like to bring in a reference to the channel called Women of Rhythm, which my friend Sonia Acharya put together. It was a series of concerts that she first started focusing on women percussionists, and then now it's also a popular Facebook and a YouTube channel. But the idea is that there are only women percussionists who you can see on that channel, and it's important to have spaces like this where women can just come up and perform what they have otherwise been doing sitting indoors. So as Karthik was also reiterating, I think it's important that these marginalized histories, whether it's women's histories, it's queer histories, it's all other kinds of or suppressed caste histories or whatever they are, they need to be talked about. And you were asking me about the need for female students. Of course, like I said, Women of Rhythm is one space, but there could be several other such platforms which are sort of dedicated spaces where women can perform. But I'd like to actually take this one step further. One of the things that kind of slightly bothers me, even when I play with women's groups or I see other women performing, is that their reference point is always the male. It's always the male aesthetic. It's always like saying, okay, I need to play at the speed and the power that this guy is playing. I want to match up to that. No, why? Create your own aesthetic. Can be fine, and this happens especially with percussion, because it's all about the macho-ness with which you play. It's all about the masculine aesthetic. Can you create a feminine aesthetic for percussion? It's possible, of course it's possible, but I think more than bringing in more female students, which of course is a must, I think there's also is a need to bring in a feminine aesthetic in Carnatic music, especially in Carnatic percussion.
Right, so that kind of opens up multiple avenues for me to again put into, but I'm trying to keep this as short as possible because we're already running out of time. Karthik, I wanted to get to the most what I think is a very integral part of today's discussion, the discussion on gurus, right? Gurus are an integral part of classical arts training. They are almost, at least as far as I know, please correct me if I'm wrong, are the only source of learning. They not only influence you with the art, but also the ideologies. If you could give us a little insight on how, your learning or your learning with your gurus itself has been part of your growth, their reaction, to accepting queer identities and getting out of that framework of, patriarchy, and how different or same your perspectives on arts has been. So this is my rather large question.
Yeah, guru is a very important concept, but it is also dangerously over celebrated. So it is always good to cautiously walk the line when we talk about what is a guru. Guru is something very personal. So, it is something that each person respects their teacher, and they find a guide in them, a friend in them, and all that. But as a society, we also should learn where to draw the line and how that position of power can be used to abuse. And the abuse need not be overtly, visible. There are microaggressions, that can make long-term harm. So we need to understand that, and I always talk about that a lot because I've seen a lot of problematic teachers. But having to talk about my example, see, I was very fortunate to have a very good guru. Initially, my mother who taught me the basics of music, and then when I came to Bangalore, I was under Guru R.K. Padmanabha sir, who taught me very generously, who taught me, with lot of love and care, and he did that to all his students. While I celebrate that fact and I enjoy my privilege, I don't know whether uh, gurus like him are accessible to everybody. So for me, so that is a very big thing that I think about. I was lucky enough to find a guru like him, but then I was a Brahmin, upper class, upper middle class boy who came from another town and was new to Bangalore, but still I had that kind of contacts through which I could at least go to his house and talk to him. And even though he's a very free person, he's a very democratic person, he's a very secular person, if you'd like to call it. But how are people free enough to go and approach such gurus? For me, that is something that always bothers me. I learned a lot of definitely the theory, the practice, and everything to do with music from my gurus. But then life is also a very big teacher, right? So when I came to terms with my identity of being queer, of who I was, and all my when I understood the politics of gender and all that, then those things taught me a lot. Those things taught me a lot about how I see art, what art means to me, and why I must sing and why I must not sing. And then there are other teachers, there are other gurus from outside who come and help you, who come and teach you in so many other ways. Like Sumana said, her other guru was Meenakshi Amma. I have many such gurus. I have many such gurus who are like behind the stage, whatever visible, but through them we learn a lot. We learn a lot about the story of art and the history of art and everything. So when you ask me the role of a guru and all that, it's a very problematic thing to speak about, because I can face a lot of aggression for speaking anything wrong. But let me say that even the most well-intentioned guru can be extremely patriarchal, can be extremely problematic, and when it comes to my identity as a queer musician, I've never discussed this with my guru still. I've discussed it with the whole world, but I've not discussed with him. I've cut away from him. It is because I do not feel comfortable. Because it is not about he has shown hate towards me or something. It is about the idea of how majoritarian idea is celebrated in all the events that are celebrated in Carnatic music. How a majoritarian leader is celebrated unequivocally by all the musicians. That makes me feel like an outsider. I don't feel safe in that space. I don't feel safe to come and talk about it. And then if it is not received properly, or even if there is a slightest hurt in whatever reaction comes out of that, it will break me as a human completely, and that is something I don't want to deal with. And because I have dealt with enough of hurt in my life as a human being, to come to accept myself, to talk, it's not easy. And personally, I fight every day. I fight every day to mark my space, to claim my space in the society, to find love, to find friendships, to find my own family. It's very difficult. On top of this, okay, so there is a part of my memory with my guru who I love, the classes that I love. All those will go away from me if there is a wrong reaction. And I have received no signal from anywhere that the reaction is going to be right, because I don't see that. I don't see that sensitivity in the way teachers in Carnatic music conduct themselves, the way they talk, the way they celebrate patriarchy, the way where there is so much of homophobia, where there is so much of disregard towards anybody slightly effeminate, where how a effeminate voice is made fun of, a effeminate person is made fun of, a weak looking person is made fun of, ugliness according to their standards is made fun of. It is a very, very cruel space in that regard. So I'm not free to go and talk to anybody there. So that's why I've cut myself off. But then I found another set of people with whom I can communicate. So like I said, I was at a space where I thought I cannot sing anymore. I should stop singing. I reached at that point where, because I was feeling anything I do does not have authenticity. Unless I'm queer, I'm gay, and I'm singing to the world, and everybody in the Sabha knows that, how can I be authentic? How can I be authentic? I sing a Rama Kirtana, they come and tell me, oh God, you should go to Ayodhya. I don't identify with that politics of Hindutva. Then why should I sing? And what if I'm taken for granted that I belong to that ideology, then it bothers me, because I should put a disclaimer every time saying, no, this is not me, this is not me, this is not me, this is who I am. It's very tiring. So I thought I will, get stop away. And at this time, I didn't know who to talk to, and it is when I wrote an email to TM Krishna saying, this is what I'm doing. And his mail actually saved the day for me. He wrote a very beautiful reply saying that, yes, it is very problematic. Yes, there are a lot of issues. Yes, do you want to stay in this art and come to terms with and agree that there is a problem? Yes, there are a lot of issues. Yes, but still I will deal with this tension, and I'll see what my art can do, how I can see through this friction and still create art. You want to stay in that space, go through that struggle every day and still see what art can come out of you, or if that is too stressful for you, please walk away, is what his reply was. And it was a very beautifully articulated email. And once I read that, I had my picture and I said, I don't have to walk away, but I'll find gurus like this from everywhere who will, keep helping me out when I need help. And I'll have to do my thing. And like Sumana said, what is most important is representation. So we need representation so that a young queer boy who is going to learn Carnatic music now knows that there are queer Carnatic musicians. Yes, there are. Yes, there are queer musicians. There are female percussionists. There are sadly, it's so annoying for me that there is not one transgender classical musician. Why? No, do we think about it? Why? So unless they come, unless there is a space and unless there is a face, how will the next generation will come and learn? How will they want to enter this space where they don't even see an idol in? Our films, our storytelling, everything lacks representation. So we need to build that. And those are the things that will be the gurus for the next generation. It's not just one person teaching who is a guru. Everything, the influences that come from society, they are more stronger than we all know, and they can hamper anybody's psyche in any which way. So we need to protect the next generation from that, and we need to build in material and representation for them to know that yes, it is theirs and they can claim their space in this.
I'm very
Karthik,
happy.
if I can just pitch in here, I just like to add a little personal story to Karthik's. Karthik, I'm actually on the other end of the spectrum, going through very similar concerns that you have. Now, I do not represent the stereotypical woman clad in a sari on stage. And there have been times when I've been asked to get out of when I've entered a concert space, I've been asked to get out because I'm not dressed in a particular way. And I did go through the same kinds of questions that you went through, Karthik. And I said, no, this is who I am. And if I cannot be true to myself, if I cannot express myself in the way that I do want to, then I'm not being honest with myself. It's not a sincere exploration. And therefore, one knows that there are problems, but there's also the space for us to just keep hammering, and just be true to yourself. I think that will do the job.
I think that was it kind of answered the next question I was going to ask you, Karthik. I was going to ask you, what do you think is like a major hurdle for queer artists or students to just, identify themselves as being queer and still being in the classical arts ethos, right? But I think, if you want to answer that, you can.
Yeah, so like I said, for one to identify as queer artists, I think as a society, our society also should be ready for that, right? So we need to prepare our society to accept and not accept actually, just to realize that there are queer people. It is a reality. Just because we don't talk about it, it does not exist. So I read something very beautifully somewhere saying that if you if you stay hidden, they will just act like you don't exist. So we need to come out and say that I'm not going to hide. I'm going to sing in with my all queerness, and this is what I am. And I need to claim that space. And every queer student should do that. And one thing I would say is, for young queer students who may be listening, just find safe spaces where you can talk. Therapy helps, and learn from teachers who are open to discuss this with you, and that will make it much more easier. And like Sumana said, stop chasing the patriarchal standards for everything. Okay, this is a standard of a more successful music academy concert, fine. Everything does not happen in music academy. There are so many other spaces. There are so many other small kacheris, theater houses, where you can sing whatever you want, in whichever way you want. And if it is authentic, there is an audience. If your art is authentic, there is an audience, there is a listener, and you will be able to touch somebody. That is more important. So we need to accept that, and every queer student should learn that. We don't have to fight for those standards. We can set our own standards.
Thank you so much, Karthik. That's very well articulated. So I just wanted to say something as I go to the next question to Sumana ma'am, that there's been a lot of audience interaction on the YouTube, but a very important aspect that just got me very excited was Sukanya ma'am commenting on the live saying female artists are everyone wants only female artists on the 8th of March, and after that everybody forgets. And that just stuck me. That just stuck me at a very personal level, because you need to have a selling point, right? It feels like, if I want to have a woman artist, right? Imagine an all-woman ensemble. That sounds very nice. But will I have a woman artist when I just generally want to have a normal kacheri? Will I be okay with having a woman percussionist at a normal kacheri? So it's the same argument that people use towards discrimination on caste or everything, that you only need it when you have that selling point of a woman is there.
Absolutely.
Right? So
thank you, ma'am, for that comment. Just to add, so what happens on March 8th, of course, is the celebration of all this, but underlying all that are two things which are even more problematic. One is either the patronizing of the woman, and the second is the exoticizing of the woman. And both are equally problematic. But you are right, it's just the selling point.
The similar thing happens to queer people during the Pride month.
Yes.
So we are celebrated left, right, and center. I don't know how many places I've spoken to that entire month, and for the next 11 months they'll not care if I'm alive or dead. So they just wash off the rainbow colors. So it's called rainbow washing. So the similar thing happens.
1st to 30th of June, everybody wants to talk about LGBTQI plus issues, and the next 11 months we will not talk about it. Anyway, so moving on, that the reason why I brought in this comment was because of the next set of questions that I had for you, Sumana ma'am. We already addressed it at the start, but I want to bring it back to focus. The Me Too movement, right? It shook the very foundation of the classical arts and has had some sense redefined the way that the classical arts has been perceived all these years, right? As Karthik said, problematic gurus, right? Gurus who have crossed that line have been called out. Not just gurus, artists, gurus, fellow artists, rasikas, anybody, right? So do you see this as a change in the positive direction, especially for female? And Karthik, probably you can also pitch in with regard to queer artists. So this is up to the next question that I have.
You want to go, Karthik?
Yeah, okay. Me Too movement is definitely a very strong movement. It is a very powerful and a movement that was needed. But I don't know, of course it created a lot of noise, when it happened here. But I don't know about the outcome, like how long and how strong it is going to be, because I still see some of the artists who were, accused by so many victims are still celebrated. They still have avenues to perform, and the people who are accused, they're out. Chinmayi still cannot sing. she's still barred from so many this thing, associations and all that. So who is going to talk about that now, right? So it is a very, very harsh reality that exists. I have seen male artists misbehave with female artists and students in myriad of ways, and just passing of comments when a female artist comes, and in the back, because I was one among them, I was sitting there and getting frustrated listening to what kind of comments they pass about a female artist who's performing in front. So it is like totally disgusting. It is a reality, and I don't know, I think it's going to take a very long time for that to be cleared out, but it is an important movement, and we should support every voice that speaks. And even in classical dance field, men get abused, queer men get abused. It's a very common thing. There is no second word to it. It is a very common thing, but people need to talk about it, and somebody needs to stand up and talk about it. And when somebody stands up, we all have to stand behind them and not just sit at home and appreciate and say, like, let him talk, let him fight it off. No, one person cannot fight things. So we have to be in this together. So it is very important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
And I
ma'am.
think I'm a little more maybe optimistic than Karthik is in this matter, because I feel that, 50 years later, I feel we will all be looking at this moment, the Me Too movement that happened in the classical arts, as a very important, very significant, game changing milestone. And particularly because we're talking about the classical arts, and there's this glitter, there's the facade, and there's this garb of righteousness and morality. But what is happening inside is really the rot. And it is, for decades, we have supported, we have enabled, and protected perpetrators, and we have silenced survivors. And this has been happening for decades, right? So what the Me Too movement did is actually exposed all the fault lines in the system that need immediate attention. And that, for me, certainly is a very positive thing. But of course, we all understand that this is only the tip of the iceberg, and the roots are really, really deep inside. What we need is a complete system cleanup, and for that, we need collective action, we need concerted action, we need long term and steady commitment to creating a system that is safe for everybody, regardless of gender identities. And what has happened is really, that there have been these short bursts. There's one large wave that happened a couple of years back, and then there are these smaller waves that happen. But I'm sure that all this will gather momentum very soon, because the churning has already started, and I do hope that the momentum happens really quickly.
Yeah, look, I definitely, I'm positive about that too. I'm positive about it too, and it's really important that it happened. It is very important that it happened. For me, the concern is that we should not let it die. We should not let it die, and this should go and reach somewhere. There's a systematic change that has to happen, and we have to take it there. So that is my concern.
Absolutely.
So we just have a couple of more questions. So I'm just going to quickly run them so that we can finish on time. Because I felt that these questions are also very important for the narrative that we're trying to build today. So again, a common question, both of you can answer however you see fit. At a very personal level, I believe that arts organizations can be the change makers in the fields of art. They're almost like the bridge between the audiences and the artists, and they're the influencers, for the lack of better term, in the arts world. But sadly, though, these arts organizations are still very much in touch with their century-old narratives of society, gender, and representation. Your thoughts? What do you think we need to do?
I would have been very happy if whatever you said was true, but sadly, art organizations are none of that. Okay, so and it is even more sadder that most of these sabhas are run by men, by very strong Brahmin men, and it is that narrative that controls everything. So that is the truth. Okay, But of course, there is a lot of change. There are new avenues coming up, and I think the pandemic itself has given a lot of voice to people to come out on social media and take their own mics and perform and all that. So it has shown that there is a possibility of this, but none of this, will be viable financially in the long run. So what really needs to happen is that we need to change as a country. There has to be government funded organizing, which is like real top quality, where there is no bureaucracy, red tape and all that, and where there is proper aid given to students who are studying. There are a lot of grants, and no artist has to go and depend on some man to give him the stage and exposure, as they like to call it, and there is quality work happening, and there is not one glamour quotient that is winning, but it is quality of work that is winning. So for all that to happen, we need strong funding, government funding, and that change has to happen, and it will take a lot of time for that to happen, because the way our politicians think and the governments think, it's like we are in some other era. We have to be at a very different place now. But thankfully, there are a lot of organizations who are doing this work. Sumana is one part of one such organization of IFA. So they do a lot of funding to very serious, good work, a very different kind of work. Max Muller Bhavan, they all do. There are some organizations like this who are doing good work, but sadly, it is not their job. They could have done so much more if the government was doing their job. So the government needs to come, and this has to be a state responsibility. Art has to be taken up by the state, because unless that happens, it will be sex, caste supremacy that will rule everything, and that will continue to go on. So for that to change, this systematic change has to happen.
I have a very simple formula for it. So if there is an old creaky rusty building and is posing a we immediately repair it, and if it's beyond repair, you raise it. That's it. So if these organizations that are standing on all these regressive old ideas are not working anymore, just raise them. We need new structures that enable democratic practices, and we need the community. I think, of course, the government thing is very important, like Karthik mentioned, but along with that, have collective community action that represents values of diversity, inclusion, and most importantly, I think compassion. We need compassion in teaching, in learning, in presenting, in every space that the classical arts exist. And for that, if we need new structures, we just have to build them.
When I said they are the arts influencers, I definitely did not mean it in the positive sense. I thought I'd just clarify that. But yes, so this is an interesting point about the arts world itself, right? That the arts, the reason why I asked this question is because as being a Rasika more than anything else, I have often noticed that the arts organizations can actually make a change, but refuse to do so because of the patriarchy that they've been fed into. So it's the same thing as the discussion that we had about gurus, I believe. So that is it. So another common link that I found between the both of you while I was researching for this is your presence on social media, right? Both of you have taken to social media to kind of put that voice out, but at the same time to engage with an audience, to make people feel connected to an art form that you practice, right? So as somebody from the Carnatic music world once said, social media has now inflicted itself in the classical art sector. So I would like to understand, do you think that social media and being active on it can be used as an effective tool to fight these problems, be it homophobia, be it gender discrimination, be it patriarchy? Do you think social media is a good enough tool, or is like a tool that could aid this process?
As soon as you see criticism about something, first is I like to understand why somebody is so threatened by it. Why somebody threatened by the democracy that think and offer. See, social media is in equal parts a curse and a boon. Okay, it depends on how we want to use it. Okay, so either it can be used to give me dopamine, boost my narcissistic ego, and spoil my mental peace in every which way, or I can just use it as a medium to talk to people who might want to listen. So for me, social media is nothing but connecting to people like me, because I always think when I was in my coming of age, like say when I was in my 10th or 12th, if I needed to talk to somebody, I didn't have anybody. So if there is some student who is wanting to talk to me right now, so they see this and they feel comfortable and they come and talk to me, and this has happened, and I'm so glad that this has happened. And that is why I put myself on social media, so that I can talk about this, and basically to create representation in any which small way that I can. And I don't think it will become a very big change or nothing, but it is these small changes that add up to become big changes in the future. So we need to use this very wisely, very intelligently, very carefully, and more than anything, very responsibly. And if we do so, it can be a very effective tool.
Yeah, same. I'm actually on social media also for the same reasons. There is, like I earlier said, there is a search I that I want to pursue, and I try and use social media as a way to make myself vulnerable in some ways. I just want to put out my honest, sincere self there and see how people respond to it. And I'm very happy, even if it's handful of responses, people often come and tell me, something about this touched me. And that's enough. It's one or two of those comments that do this. And I'm not doing a great raga. I'm not doing the most fantastic corvée or something, but this little piece that I put up, somebody has been touched by it, and that's enough for me. That's why I'm there. And I feel that it's my responsibility to share honesty in the practices that we are all engaged in. I think this is something that I find is lacking in the way we have come to present ourselves. So that is really important for me.
Understand how social media can be misleading in many which ways, because sometimes, as much as we find voices that are meaningful, there are voices which are being celebrated so much, which can make us feel small, which can make us feel irrelevant. But I think every student must understand that everything that is titillation, everything that is standing ovation is not great. It need not be great. Unassuming ways, great work happens there, and that will stay. And when people are mature, when they're ready for it, when they're beyond this shine, when they need real meaning, they'll come to this kind of art. So, and for students also, it is important to be careful not to have this urge to put up everything that they learn. Like if you learn a Vannam today, you don't have to go and sing it on social media tomorrow. There's no wrong if you sing it also, but eventually I think that is where even teachers come to. If a teacher tells you don't do it, you're not supposed to do it, I think you're killing their freedom of expression. You should have a dialogue with them and tell them like why maybe doing this is not necessary, and maybe working with it internally and finding their voice and then presenting it will make a impact, and to prepare the student for that. So teachers need to adapt themselves to teach, handle students of the current generation. So that is also very important.
Okay, so I felt like you touched upon a very a niche thing there when you said if a teacher says no, don't do it, you're obviously killing their freedom, but rather have a dialogue with them. So this kind of puts into perspective the idea that gurus have historically been kept at a place of pedestal where you are like, if my guru says something, that is my ultimatum. Right. There is no second guessing something that a guru says. So I think gurus, as much as a position of privilege, are also at a position of responsibility. And I think it's very important that gurus start to adapt and recognize that in today's world.
Yeah, it's very important that the lines that the gurus draw, we need to understand whether we are respecting it out of love or out of fear. So when it comes from a place of fear, then there is problem in it. But when it comes from a place of love and total surrender and understanding, then it can be very, very helpful for the student, because obviously a good guru has the best of their interest in their heart. So it should come from a place of love, and there should be a lot of dialogue. This hush hush of no, don't ask me now, I'll tell you after 10 years and all doesn't work. It can really mess up a student's head. You just have a dialogue and talk to them, let them be stupid, ask them questions. If it angers you, just talk to them and tell them that they're irritating you. It's okay, I think they'll understand. It's important to have that conversation.
True, very true. Okay, so almost to the last question. I'm so sorry we're short over time. What do you see as the future at an individual level, or the larger picture of the arts, both professionally and personally? Each of you can answer that, and then we'll close today.
Okay, I'll go. I've already said this. I think for me, it is a search on a very individual level. I am on a constant search to be able to express myself in the way that is not received, that is not constructed for me. I am on a search to find what my true expression on my instrument is, what my true and sincere expression would be. And I don't know what that would sound like. It might sound, I don't know, nothing like what percussion should sound like, nothing like all the choruses and the compositions, but I do want to go on that journey, and I'm already on it. And hopefully someday, actually it's not even a point. It's not like you reach a destination. This is an ongoing journey, and I'm in love with this journey that I am in. On a larger level, we've just been talking about it. Something that I want to see happen in the classical arts, especially, is the decentralization of power. Whether it's the sabhas, it's organizations, or whether it's individuals, I think power needs to be shifted. And all that should matter is knowledge being in the center. So all of us, whether you're a student, you're a teacher, ultimately all of us are seekers of this knowledge. And that should be the spirit with which the classical arts are taught, are learned, and are performed. I think that's a dream. And as individuals, all of us will move towards that. I'm sure all of us are somewhat in that spirit. So we will all do our little bit to contribute to something like this. And hopefully we will be able to build these new structures. Yeah.
For me individually, like Sumana said, I don't have a destination. I don't have a benchmark. No, for me, it's a journey, it's a process, it's a way of life. Art is a way of life for me. So for me, it's very important. What I'm very possessive about is to not lose my humanity. I want to be in touch with every human emotion that is going around. I want my art to express every pain of a migrant laborer working, of a woman suffering, of rape, of everything that's going on, the anger that surrounds it. I want my art to talk about it, and I want to be present everywhere and feel the pain of the collective humanity, the love of the humanity, as a collective, fear, everything. Like the pandemic taught us that we can be one as a whole world. This one thing we realized now, that we are one. So I want to feel that oneness with everybody through my art, and that is my journey. And what I see is, I see a lot of hope. I see a lot of hope. I see a lot of positive futures, because I think the new generation, may it be women, may it be oppressed classes of caste, or queer communities, or everybody, they are not going to stay silent. They are not going to stay silent, and they have been oppressed enough. And it's a time, and when there is too much of oppression, then there's a lava that bursts out. So that will come and it will burn everything, and then there will be a new planet. There will be something new that is going to come out, and that is my hope. And I also want to see a future where every art is celebrated, and one art does not feel superior to another art, and we don't look at another art as being inferior. So I want to find that equal space, and I dream for that equal space, and I'm very positive that that will happen, and I like to stay positive. So that is what I think.
Thank you so much, Karthik. I think that kind of closes up the entire discussion for today. It's almost impossible to negate the gender, political, and social influence that the arts community has on the world, and vice versa. As I said at the beginning, we are at a juncture of introspection and change. We as individuals, as artists, as performers, need to look back at our individual journey as students of the arts, as performers of the arts, and more importantly, as members of the audience. We need to take a step back and understand who or what we stand by and why do we do it. But as someone associated with the arts, it is my firm belief that we are headed in the positive direction, and I hope that the panelists will also agree with me on that note. Before we close for today, I just thought I'd ask Karthik to sing a few lines for us, as a perfect closing to today's session. So, Karthik, if you don't mind.
Sure, Akshat. ಇದೇನೇ ಸಖಿ ಇದೇನೇ ಸಖಿ ಕಾಂತನು ಮುನಿದೇರ್ಪ ಇದೇನೇ ಸಖಿ ಕಾಂತನು ಮುನಿದೇರ್ಪ ಸುಧಾಂಶು ಮುಖಿ ಕೇಳ್ ಸೋಜಿಗವಾಗಿದೆ ಇದೇನೇ ಸಖಿ ಕಾಂತನು ಮುನಿದೇರ್ಪ ಸುಧಾಂಶು ಮುಖಿ ಕೇಳ್ ಸೋಜಿಗವಾಗಿದೆ ಇದೇನೇ ಸಖಿ
I don't think we could have ended on a better note. Thank you so much. I'm very grateful. Apart from the usual thank you that every host says, I think I'm very grateful at a very personal level to have been able to have this conversation with the both of you, because I feel like it puts an important point of perspective, not just for our students, but for a lot of us who are someday associated with the arts and need that kind of awakening at some point. Thank you so much to Ms. Sumana Chandrashekhar and Mr. Karthik for taking their valuable time to be here with us and take part in this rather enlightening discussion. Thank you so much, Vannam, IIT Madras and Classic Arts Club for putting together this conversation. When they asked me to do this, I was super nervous, but I think I had the most fun time today. So thank you so much to the both of you. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. It was lovely to talk to you. And thank you, Akshat, for being such a nice host and asking such beautiful questions. Thank you. We love talking to all of you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Akshat, and thank you, Vannam, everybody at Vannam who thought of bringing the two of us here.